Madisonville sat in western Kentucky like a town trying very hard to appear ordinary. It rested among gentle hills, tobacco fields, coal country, and slow-moving creeks. There were church bells not far beyond the rooftops, and freight trains moaning in the night. Dogs barked at creeping shadows, while the distant whistle of a locomotive carried secrets toward places with impossible names. It was never large. Even now, only about 20,000 souls call it home. Yet, for a child standing at the corner of a quiet street, Madisonville could feel infinite. And when I lived there, it was a town of courthouse clocks, railroad tracks, coal miners carrying black dust home on their boots, and of nurses and factory workers and farmers who measured time by planting, harvest, church picnics, high school football games, and county fairs. Time was measured in seasons. Autumn belonged to smoke and memory, when cornfields yellowed and tobacco leaves darkened in barns, when sunlight turned golden and slanted across the streets as though it had become tired after a long, hot season. The town smelled of leaves and far-off wood fires, and people spoke more softly. When winter came, it never ruled for long. Snow came as a visitor, not a resident. A dusting one week, ice another. The hills grew bare, exposing every branch and fence line. Children waited for school closings, while adults studied gray skies. Spring always arrived as a conspiracy among trees. Dogwoods burst into white flame, and redbuds painted the hillsides lavender. Lawnmowers emerged from garages like strange mechanical insects awakened from hibernation. Every porch seemed occupied. Every front yard became a stage, while boys rode bicycles until sunset, and girls skipped rope beneath trees dripping with blossoms. When summer came, the heat lay over the town like a second sky. The air remained heavy among maple, oak, and sycamore. Cicadas wound up their invisible machinery before dawn and sang until darkness, and butterflies floated above clover and roadside weeds. Thunderheads gathered in distant counties and marched across the horizon. Rain fell often enough to keep everything green, and by August the trees seemed swollen with life. If you stood on one of the steep hills above town on a July evening when the sun had begun sinking inside a haze of gold and copper, you witnessed summer among the lightning bugs, the smell of cut grass, and the long roads curving away toward the horizon. The season felt determined to last forever. But this is the story of the summer of 1973, when forever proved shorter than anyone imagined. I was young then, and lived at the top of a hill that seemed sculpted by some giant hand and left to harden in the sun. The road descended in a long, steady slope that left your legs aching on the way back up. At the bottom of this hill, where the road turned, sat a simple white house with a green lawn stretching out in front. The man who lived there had brought his family from Norway, or so the porch swing court of aunts and uncles whispered over iced tea and cigarette smoke. They knew he had come to Madisonville for a job at a big local company, and that he had a young wife and a little girl. All they really knew was they were foreign, which in a small town often meant knowing nothing at all. What I saw was a young man in full bloom, tall, broad-shouldered, fair-haired, with blue eyes borrowed from a colder country. He moved easily across the lawn, mowing in straight lines, clipping hedges, lifting soil bags as if filled with feathers. He turned on the sprinklers with bare hands and stood in the spray, blessing the grass. His wife tended the flower beds. She looked carved from the same northern sunlight, blonde, blue-eyed, young, strong, and beautiful in the unself-conscious way of those unaware of it. She knelt among flowers in summer dresses, brushed hair from her face with her wrist, and smiled whenever the little girl ran by. The little girl. I remember her before anything else. She was 4, maybe, small enough to vanish behind a hedge, bright enough to fill the yard. Sunlit hair, flashing blue eyes, she ran as if the earth lifted her. She laughed at everything as if joy had found a home in her. She hid behind a shrub, knees and elbows visible, giggling, giving herself away. Her father shaded his eyes, turned and called in mock despair, "Where has she gone?" His wife would join him, looking behind the mailbox, under the porch step, around the corner of the house, anywhere but where the child stood trembling with laughter. "Gone forever," her mother would say. The little girl would explode from behind the hedge, shrieking with triumph, and her father would stumble backward as if struck by lightning. "There she is!" Then came the chase. He would grab the hose and send an arc of water shooting across the yard. The little girl would scream and dash away. But she wanted to be chased, wanted her father thundering after her like a harmless summer creature. She welcomed the shock of the cool spray on her bare arms and legs. Her mother, pretending to escape as well, lifted the hem of her skirt just enough to run, laughing when the water reached her shoulders. They were soaked in minutes, all 3 of them, and the heat of that western Kentucky afternoon rose around them in waves, and the cicadas screamed from the trees, and the water flashed in the sun, and I stood on the road, pretending to be only passing by. At first I only waved. They always waved back, making their world feel as if it had widened just enough to include me. Day after day I found reasons to walk down the hill. Sometimes I claimed I needed exercise. There were times I said I wanted to see the town. Now and then I told myself nothing at all. I simply went. A ritual forms quietly. One day it's an accident, next a habit. By the 3rd or 4th day, it's almost prayer. I'd walk down the hill, the road turn, and the White House would appear. The lawn would open and the family would be there. The little girl would run, her father would wave, and his wife would smile from the flower beds. In Madisonville, for those few minutes, seemed the happiest place God had ever misplaced on earth. One afternoon, I decided to stop and say hello. It took courage, more than I expected. I was a young teenager, awkward in all the usual ways, carrying too much silence and never knowing what to do with my hands. The tall man saw me pause near the edge of the yard. He shut off the mower. The whole afternoon seemed to fall quiet around us, except for the ticking of hot metal and the rising saw of cicadas. I told him my name. He smiled and stepped toward me, wiping his hand on his pants before offering it. "Eric," he said. His grip was warm and strong. I welcomed him to town. It sounded foolish the moment I said it, as if Madisonville belonged to me and I'd been made its ambassador by the courthouse clock. But he did not laugh. He looked sincerely grateful. "Thank you," he said. "That is kind." At that moment I understood something I had not understood before. A small town can smile from a distance and still keep its doors locked. It can wave from porches and still measure strangers by the inch. It can know your name, your job, your country, your child's age, and still not know your loneliness. After that, the ritual deepened. Now there were real hellos. Sometimes Eric called from the yard. Sometimes the little girl waved both arms so enthusiastically that it seemed she meant to greet the whole world. Sometimes his wife lifted her muddy hand from the flowers and smiled in her soft way. I never stayed long. I wasn't family or a friend. I was just a neighbor from up the road, a boy walking by, passing through their light. But I carried that light home with me. I carried the little girl's laughter back up the hill, the flash of hose water, breathing in the smell of cut grass and moist earth, and watching Eric chase his daughter while his wife laughed among the flowers. In western Kentucky, summer storms rarely arrive without warning. First came the heavy air from distant clouds gathering beyond the horizon, then the low growl of thunder announcing itself from miles away. But some storms traveled in silence. They formed beyond sight, beyond hearing or imagination. They arrived beneath clear skies while the sun still shone. By the time you realized they were there, they had already taken something you could never replace. I walked down the hill one day to discover that such a storm had already passed through. No one ran across the yard. No child hid behind the hedge. No woman knelt among the flowers. Eric sat on the small steps leading up to the front door, bent forward, his head resting in his large hands. I lifted my hand. He did not see me, or he saw me and could not answer. I kept walking. News came as it always did in that small town, via whispers, not announcements. It moved from porch to kitchen, kitchen to telephone, telephone to grocery aisle. Eric's wife had died in the night. She had simply gone to sleep and not returned. Because she was young, an autopsy was performed, and they found a rare defect in her heart, a hidden flaw, a small treachery written into the body, a time bomb carried quietly beneath all that blonde hair, all that laughter, all that summer strength. The news took me to a place I had not known before. Until then, death had belonged mostly to history books, newspaper headlines, and distant relatives whose names I barely remembered. It existed, but somewhere beyond the horizon of my own life. This was different. This was someone whose laughter I had heard only days before, someone whose smile I could still picture. For the first time, I understood that tragedy did not always happen somewhere else, to someone else. Sometimes it stepped quietly into an ordinary summer afternoon and changed everything. The summer continued, but it no longer felt infinite. The heat thickened. Cicadas sounded harsher. The hills seemed longer. The White House, once so bright, looked pale and exposed. The humidity felt heavier. But it's only air. You adjust to it. You breathe through it. You sweat and complain and survive. Loss is different. Loss enters the room and takes the furniture. It removes the chair where someone always sat. It silences a voice you expected to hear. It leaves a place at the table untouched, and somehow makes that empty place larger than everything around it. Humidity may press against your skin, but loss presses from the inside. Weeks went by before I saw Eric again. He stood in the yard, but not as before. He did not work or play. He wandered. That's the only word for it. He moved across the yard as though searching for something lost in the grass. He had changed so much that I almost did not recognize him. The strength was gone. His shoulders sagged. His face hollowed. His eyes were fixed on something unreachable. I wanted to wave. I wanted to say hello. I wanted to offer something. But what could a boy offer a man whose world had been cut in half? So I passed in silence. Tragedy does not always arrive like a lightning strike. Sometimes it behaves like a river in flood. The first rise in water seems impossible to ignore. You stand watching the current carry away trees and fences, and you tell yourself the worst must surely be over. Then the river rises again. What survived the first surge vanishes beneath the second. 3 weeks after her mother went to sleep and never returned, the little girl followed the same silent path. She had inherited the same defect, the same cruel fuse, only shorter. I heard it and could not understand. I understood the words, mother, daughter, defect. but the loss blocked out the sun. I thought of the hedge where she had hidden so badly, her knees sticking out. I thought of her father pretending not to see her, of the hose water flashing like coins in the air, her running toward the spray, away from it, toward it again, laughing because she believed the world had been made for that exact moment. And perhaps it had. Perhaps the world, ashamed of itself, had given her those afternoons in advance. Perhaps somewhere beyond the reach of our understanding, some balance was being kept. Not a fair balance. The universe has never shown much interest in fairness, but balance all the same. Or perhaps I am only an old man reaching back across half a century, trying to make sense of something that never made sense at all, trying to find a reason where there was none, trying to give shape to grief. After that, I no longer walked down the hill every day. I made excuses. It was too hot, or there was nowhere to go. The truth, however, was that I feared the curve, the White House, seeing Eric and not seeing the man I'd known. 2 weeks later, before summer could melt into autumn, Eric followed his wife and daughter. People said he stopped eating, stopped caring. They said he had gone into himself and found no reason to come back. Adults had phrases for it. They always do. They talked about grief and shock and depression and tragedy. They spoke gently, then changed the subject because supper needed cooking and lawns still needed mowing, and Madisonville, like all towns, had learned the old craft of continuing. But I knew more than the rest. I have seen a man alive in the grass with his wife and child, lifted by their laughter, and I have seen the light leave him. In the span of a few weeks, I watched Eric and his family vanish like fireflies at dawn. I believed then, as I believe now, that a heart does not need a defect to fail. Sometimes it breaks so completely that the body simply follows. For the rest of that summer, the road and hill and house remained, but time assaulted everything. The flowers withered, and the grass rose. The hedge kept its secret poorly, with no child left to hide behind it. The hose lay coiled near the house like a sleeping snake. No silver water crossed the yard. No young mother ran laughing through the spray. No one pretended astonishment at the miraculous appearance of the little girl. Autumn came, as it always does. Smoke returned to the air, cornfields yellowed, and leaves gathered along the road. People spoke more softly again, and the town turned its face once again toward football games, school nights, church suppers, and other ordinary mercies. But I could not pass that house without hearing summer trapped there. Not the summer that ended, the summer before it ended. The one with the child running and Eric laughing. The one with his wife among the flowers, lifting her face to the sun. The one that had seemed intent to last forever. Years have taken much from me. They have blurred faces, softened voices, misplaced whole rooms of memory. But I still remember the hill and the road curving at the bottom as if it had arms, and the simple white house held there in that curve before the road went on toward town. And before I remembered death, the porch steps and the bowed head and the terrible news carried through town like a black ribbon, I remember joy. I remember a little girl in the summer of 1973 running across a green lawn in Madisonville, Kentucky, laughing while her father chased her with a hose and her mother pretended to flee. I remember the water shining and the cicadas singing and thinking that no family anywhere had ever been happier. That is how I keep them, not as gossip or as a tragedy, not even as a lesson carved into a boy by a careless universe. I keep them in the yard, in the heat, forever soaked and laughing beneath the summer sky, as the road curves gently around them, holding them there for one more moment before it carries everything away.